Union encampment had been attacked by the Confederates. And the Confederates had captured 100 horses and a brigadier general. And so Lincoln read the message. He felt very bad. And he just turned to the operator and said, "Hate to lose 100 horses." And the guy said, "Well, Mr. President, what about the brigadier general?" He said, "I can make a brigadier general in 5 minutes. It's hard to replace 100 horses." I never forgot that.
Hey teammates, it's me, K, right here with another episode of the web series, The New Normal. I'm super excited about our guest today. This man needs no introduction. He is the General Colin Powell. General Powell, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you, Chief.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's an honor to have you here and an honor to have you speak a little bit about leadership to our audience. I am interested, since this series is titled The New Normal, how has this affected your battle rhythm? So I know you're a speaker, you still travel quite a bit. How has being quarantined or being at home affected your battle rhythm?
Well, quarantine has been okay. It's not bad to have a little bit of time where you can go through your basement and throw out stuff that's been there forever that you're trying to get rid of. And so my wife and I have been doing that, and my children live fairly nearby, but they don't come into the house. They just drop by and say hello. Okay. So we're following all the early rules that were given out about being separated and keeping the distance. Even people who come here to do work, for example, keep their distance, and we're working hard on it. So that, of course, affects my schedule a little bit. And as you might appreciate, I'm in the speaking business, but all the speeches are gone because all of the events have been canceled. So postponement and cancellation has given me a great deal of opportunity to go out and work in the yard, fix things that haven't been fixed in many, many years. And so we're trying to follow the rules, but I've been also following what the administration has been doing and what the various governors have been doing. And I follow it in the hope that we will get through this soon enough. But it's deeply troubling right now that we have lost over 50,000 of our fellow citizens, and it's going to go, the number's probably going to hit 60,000 within the next day or two. And we have still a long way to go. And the danger is that it's not going to just simply go away. It may come back, as you noticed in recent press coverage. And with some of the great people who are working on this. Fauci is one of my dear friends, known him forever, and listen to what he says. And so let's hope that while we're suffering through this, we're working hard to get vaccines and to do testing so that even if it comes back, we will have tested it and we will have done vaccine work so that we know how to fight it. Right now, we really do not know how to fight it. And we're just catching up with testing and with ventilators and all kinds of other activities. And I think it's especially a problem in the military services because we tend to be close together. That's you see what happened to the aircraft carrier and other ships now. And I can only imagine the difficulties that our services are having in doing the training, actually being on the battlefield and in an airplane. How this can affect what we're trying to do. But, we've faced problems before, and I'm sure that our services will do the best they can to keep serving the nation as they have for all these many, many years, especially the Air Force. My Air Force, I like to call it, because I was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yes,
not
sir,
showing off. It's just that people would say, well, what about the Air Force? I said, they're mine too.
Right.
And Air Force has been a great service in my 62 years of having since I entered the military, and they have taken great care of me and have served me so well. And there wasn't a conflict that I got into, either Panama or in Desert Shield or Desert Storm, that we didn't need the Air Force to get us there, support us there, and then get us back home. Thank you.
Yes, sir. No, thank you for the kind words. And I'd have to throw in a plug now for our sister service, the Space Force, that everybody's looking forward to the Space Force coming on board and continuing to augment, joint operations. It's interesting. You talk about how challenging this is, how difficult this is. Your 13 rules, your number one, the very first rule says, it ain't as bad as you think. It will look better in the morning. How should leaders today apply this concept?
I think it's pretty straightforward if you'll remember that it is not a prediction of what the morning will be like. It is just have an attitude that says that no matter how tough things look today, think about it tomorrow and have an attitude, a positive attitude, an optimistic attitude. Now, where did I get such a rule? It's not a rule, really. It's just a thought. It was when I was a young lieutenant serving in Germany as a platoon leader. And my commander was a captain who had served in Korea, an older gentleman. And he would take us young lieutenants up to the club at night. You do remember what a club is, don't you, Chief?
Yes, sir, I do.
Take us to the club at night, and we would have a few drinks. This is many years ago, 62 to be exact. And he would tell us these stories. And one of the stories he loved to tell, and all of us lieutenants loved it, was that, hey, you guys, you think you're so hot, you brand new lieutenants. You think you're so sharp. You go home at night thinking everything's okay. All the weapons have been accounted for. All the troops have been accounted for. Nothing else is missing equipment-wise. You got the Jeeps and everything, and you've had a great day of training. And then you go to bed. While you're asleep, bad stuff happens. So when you get up the next morning, two troops are missing, 3 rifles are missing. You had an accident in the barracks. Somebody broke out all the windows, and it doesn't look good. Well, remember, you just remember that you have responsibility to start all over again. It'll be better in the morning because you're there and you're going to fix it. So it's an attitude that I've carried around for the last 60 odd years that essentially says, Powell, no matter how bad things look, you can help make it different, and you can improve it if you just have an attitude that says, we'll fix it in the morning. I did this as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I did it as Secretary of State. Secretary of State, I would come in the morning, have all of my people there on my main staff, and I wanted them to see me because I wanted them to know no matter what the newspapers had done to me that day, I'm okay. You're okay. Now let's get going. We're going to do better today, and we're going to improve ourselves. We're going to make it a better department, a better nation, and it works. And so I always had to have a smile on my face. I always had to let my people see that, I'm okay and we're going to do better in the morning. Got it? Got it.
Right. I think that's a fantastic attitude to have for every leader. Now, sir, you also talk about be calm and be kind. And you talked a little bit about in your book, this emotional spectrum that we as leaders should have. Now, I also recall that at one time you were a bit of a hothead. And so I'm interested in how did you
told you that?
I read it. I read it in your book. And so I'm interested in how did you improve your level of emotional intelligence, and what tips do you have for leaders who may be hotheads like you were as a young lieutenant?
There were 2 things that happened back then, and I'll just talk about one of them. But I got mad one day in the orderly room with my company commander there. I was a young lieutenant, and I needed something from the supply warehouse, and I just got mad and I flipped. I started cursing. I started screaming and shouting, and my commander, after it was all over, said to me, "Don't ever do that in my presence again. Don't ever lose your temper like that in my presence again." And so when he wrote my first efficiency report as a young officer, he put a sentence in there that says, "Young Powell has a high temperature, a very, very bad temper, which he makes a mature effort to control." So it was great. He was hitting me, but he was telling me how to get out. Right. And so for the next 60 odd years, I always remembered, be careful, always control your temper. And I found this to be very useful in peacetime and especially in wartime. And when you're the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and you're doing a Desert Storm or the invasion of Panama, and you're in your command center and all hell is breaking loose and people are starting to get excited, that's the time when I, the chairman, have to be calm. Remain calm so that everybody else remains calm. And once we're calm, then let's work on the problem. Let's solve the problem. And so remaining calm always to me was a great attitude to have. And it would allow you to do your job well, because not everybody's screaming around you. You're calm, they'll be calm. And then be kind is a broader issue. I have found over the course of my career and the course of my life that you can make a lot of money just by being kind to the people who work for you. Be kind, even in the midst of a problem. Be kind. Always show kindness in one way or another, and people will do anything that you ask of them because they believe you believe in them and you're being kind. And I have found that to be extremely useful. Mrs. Sofrino sitting next to me may disagree with that because I'm not always as kind as I can be to her. But you got to have somebody that you can chew out.
Right.
But she
Harry,
is so
Harry is my
good.
person.
Yeah, she is so good that when I would lose it, she would tell me it's time to go into the office. And she would lock me in my office for about 10 minutes, telling everybody outside, he'll be okay in 10 minutes. Go away and come back. And that's about as long as I, lost my temper. And it wasn't much of a loss. We could usually sense when it was happening. I go away and take it easy. So remain calm, be kind. That's the attitude you should always convey to the people who work for you and to your superiors. But I'm more interested in the people who work for me. And because you represent mostly the enlisted people, not mostly, but that is who you represent, the enlisted personnel within the Air Force. That's my place. I understand that the people who get the work done are officers, sure, but it's the troops. And it brings me to one of my favorite stories with Abraham Lincoln at the center of it. And Lincoln used to leave the White House in the early years of the Civil War and go up to the north part of the city where it was cooler and quieter and just sit there and relax. But there was also a telegraph station in the old soldiers' home that he went to. And one night he was sitting there and a message came in, and the message said, which the president read, it came in from Manassas, where a Union encampment had been attacked by the Confederates. And the Confederates had captured 100 horses and a brigadier general. And so Lincoln read the message. He felt very bad. And he just turned to the operator and said, hate to lose 100 horses. And the guy said, well, Mr. President, what about the brigadier general? He said, I can make a brigadier general in 5 minutes. It's hard to replace 100 horses. I never forgot that. And one reason I never forgot it is that the day I was promoted to brigadier general, a good friend of mine gave me that sentence in a frame. You can't see it right now, but it's on the wall off to the left. I've had it for all these years. I've never forgotten it. Remember, it's the horses, the privates, the airmen, the pilots. They're the ones who get the work done, not you. And always make sure that you know your job is to protect those enlisted people who get the work done. And I've taken that into private life. Protect the workers, protect the coders, protect the people, protect the guys who park your car in the morning. They're the ones who get the work done. Don't ever lose sight of that. And your job is to inspire them, cause them to be inspired, more than motivated, inspired, and make sure they have what they need to get the job done. Make sure they understand the purpose of their work, and get the job done. They'll do anything for you if you will treat them in that manner.
Yes,
Importantly,
I would say, you set such a good example for all of us. You write about, you mentioned the guys in the garage. You wrote about being kind to all of the folks that you encounter on your staff. But I've actually heard both in person and have read stories about people who have encountered you in random places sometimes, and just how kind of a person you are and how engaging and how personable you are. So thank you for that good example. Now you mentioned when you first became a brigadier general, you also write about, do your best because someone is always watching. And so I recall that from the time you were a teenager working for Coca-Cola all the way until Secretary of State, someone was always saying, hey, General Powell, or Powell at the time, I think you should have this job or that job. But when you first became a brigadier general, you write about that you received a less than favorable report, I think as a division commander. Tell me how you overcame that, and what can leaders today do if they find themselves in that situation?
As a leader, I found that one of my responsibilities was always to be candid, honest, and faithfully true to my superiors, even if they didn't like hearing what I had to say to them, because that was my job and my responsibility. And for young people and those of us who are older, but the sergeants in the Air Force and the Army or the junior officers, you have to learn early on in life to tell the truth. And I would always surround myself with people who would tell me the truth, even if it made me mad. I've corrected my language I was about to use. Even if it made me mad, they had to tell me, we'll get over it and we'll be okay tomorrow. And so the story that I tell in the book is when I was a brigadier general, I ran into difficulties with my commander, a 2-star. And he gave me a very unfavorable report, which should have ended my career. And when I saw the report, and I went and talked to him about it, I said, "This is what you honestly believe about me." And he said, "Yes, but I think you'll improve, but this is what I honestly believe about you." And I said, "If that's your judgment, write it up." And they did, and they gave me a very unfavorable report. I thought, well, it's the end of my career, I'll go on and do something else. But unbeknownst to me, senior officers who were there, 3 and 4 stars, they knew there was a problem in that organization. So when I pointed out the problem in a manner that they heard it, they pretty much protected me. And of course, as you can tell, my career was not ended, it went on. They appreciated and respected that. And for that reason, I never stopped doing it. I've gotten in trouble. I have had senior people get a little annoyed at what I said, even as Secretary of State or as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If you ask me what I think, you're going to hear it. You may not like it, but you're going to hear it because that's who I am. And that, I think, is my solemn responsibility. And when I was Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, at the beginning of the war with the Iraqis in Desert Storm, but first Desert Shield before Desert Storm, we had a meeting at the White House, and I spoke a little out of turn. And when I got back to the office, my boss, Secretary Cheney, said, "You got to be careful about what you say." And I said, "Sir, I understand that, but I have to say what I think is my responsibility to say." And we never had another problem. And he knew that I would always tell him, and I would always tell the president what I thought. It got so good that even though Mr. Cheney would always present the Department of Defense's position on something, and that's what he would tell the president. This is the Department of Defense's position, which made it my position. But he would always, if he had to, say, "But Mr. President, Colin doesn't agree with everything. Colin, tell him what you think." So he encouraged me to do it if he knew that I had a different view. And it served the purpose of being a chairman. It served my purpose well, and it served the purpose of the government well. And that was Dick Cheney and President Bush. And they accepted my comments, and I didn't get fired, and I kept moving on up because, but if they had fired me, I have another little saying that I have that said, get ready to take the train, if it's over for you, move on. And if they ever said to me, "It's over, take the train," I'd take the train and leave the station and go on. Life is short. And in order to make life useful and to make yourself useful and profitable to your bosses, you got to tell them the truth and take whatever consequences come from that.
Yeah, well, I think we're all grateful that you didn't get fired at that time. And
it was a close run thing, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Hey, sir, let's talk about, and I'll ask the audience to excuse my French, but you wrote about it, so let's talk about it. Busy bastards. I think this is probably more prevalent. One, I'll ask you to explain a little bit what you mean by it, but I think it's more prevalent in the military and maybe even in corporate America. You would know that better than me. than not, that folks who are working lots and lots of long and maybe unnecessary hours and causing some unnecessary burden on the people that work around them. Tell me about your philosophy on busy bastards.
It was given to me by a general I worked for when I was a G3 of a division in Vietnam. I was just a young major. And I was talking about a certain individual, and the general, his name was General Geddes, he turned to me and he said, Colin, when you grow up and become more senior, don't be one of those busy bastards who's just making work, you know, doing everything he can to add stuff. You know, remember that the people who work for you and the people you work for, human beings, they need time off. They need to have to spend time with their families. And so beware the guy who seems to be never out of things to do. And that was fine with me because that was my way of doing things. And when I went to the State Department years later, I made it clear to everybody that you guys leave when you're ready to leave. Don't think you have to hang around because I'm hanging around. But you don't look at me as a busy bastard. I had one fellow who asked me, is it okay if I take time off? This was a senior diplomat. Is it okay if I take time off and go exercise in the afternoon? And my answer was, I don't care what you do in the afternoon, as long as you get your work done. You know, you get your work done. And don't hang around because I hang around. Because you will find that generally I will leave my office as soon as I can in the afternoon, just so others will leave and go home, take care of your kids, you know, take time with your family, with your wife or your husband, and get the work done. But don't do it in a way that consumes you entirely. We all have to live as human beings who have needs, who have wants, and so don't be a busy bastard. I don't admire it. And don't think that I'm there, I leave at 5 and you're gonna hang around. You're a busy bastard and you're screwing up. That's not the way I want it. You leave when you're free to leave.
Well, certainly I think you probably understand that you are a unicorn in that sense, because I think most military leaders believe and maybe have grown up to believe and have been trained that long hours, hard work, lots of work, working on the weekends, coming in on your off time is somehow the thing to do and the thing to be admired. But I myself agree with you, and I've tried to practice that throughout my career, and certainly now as a Chief Master in the Air Force.
As Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as a Corps Commander, and as Secretary of State, I never worked weekends unless, you know, there was a terrible thing going on or a war had broke out, and I had to be there. I stayed home on Saturdays and Sundays and did a lot of homework there, but not with my staff, not with my assistants. I want them to take the time off or do whatever they have to do. And so it's one of the biggest definitions of a busy bastard, someone who comes in on the weekend and brings in everybody else with them. Because as chairman or secretary, if I showed up on a weekend, all kinds of other people start coming in. And I would usually be fixing an old car on a weekend, even if there was a war going on.
Right.
And so just pace yourself. And I never gave anybody extra credit or improved their grades because they worked hard on a Saturday and Sunday. I was more impressed by the person who got the work done and didn't need to come in on a Saturday and a Sunday.
Yes, sir. Hey, I wanted to get some advice from you. So one of my roles is to develop the talent and bring up the senior enlisted leaders in the Air Force. And you write about your 50-50 rule, you know, past performance versus future potential. I was wondering if you might expound on that, and then talk a little bit about outside of, hey, you've done a great job in your past roles, what things should we be looking for as we promote leaders? Because you also talked about, you know, some leaders that were promoted to general that probably shouldn't have been promoted. So I'm interested in, you know, what are those intangible things that we should be looking for with your 50-50?
Promoting people is such a human event. And the point I made in the first thing you said was performance is important. You have to make sure that they have demonstrated successful performance in the past. But before you promote them, do they have potential to do well at a higher rank? And most of the people that I've promoted or I've worked with could demonstrate that potential to me in one way or another. But I also ran into several folks who could not stand the promotion. The promotion took them to a level they were not ready for or couldn't handle. They did not have the potential to work at that level. And so often I had to relieve or fire somebody because they did great as a colonel or as a lieutenant colonel or as an E7 or an E8, but they did not do well as an E9 or as an O9. And that's the tough part, because you have to call them in, tell them, I think the world of you, but you should have stayed at the rank you were before you got promoted. And I'm going to give you a job that is more in keeping with those ranks and your potential and your performance. Most times they understood it. Very often, though, one of the problems I've run into is that you don't act soon enough. You let a guy or person who does not really have the potential for the next rank, but you promote him anyway. And you wait too long to realize that they are not meeting the potential that you have for them. And people are waiting for you to do something about it. And doing something about it means relieving somebody or moving somebody to a different job. And I have learned over the years that don't lose too much time before you move somebody around. They probably can do very well somewhere else. They can't do very well where you have them. And, you hate to do it. You hate to bring somebody in. You hate to sit them down. You hate to have this awful conversation. But the reality of it all is that you have to do it. And interestingly, once you do it, the whole organization is saying to themselves, what took him so long? Didn't he see this a long time ago? And I've always hoped that I did see it a long time ago and acted then. And so, this is the case with officers or enlisted personnel, where it's a human thing. And I've always tried to treat it in a way that is the best thing for the organization, not the best thing for them. The organization has to come first. The troops you're leading, they have to come first. And if there's somebody who is not up to the standards, then it is your responsibility as a leader to do the most difficult job you have, and that is to move somebody on. It's painful, but at the end of the day, you've done well for the organization, and most often you've done well for the person you relieve. A lot of them have been waiting to be relieved. It's the truth. It's the truth.
Yes, sir.
But my experience with enlisted individuals and enlisted leaders taught me once again that I needed them. I learned a lot as a young officer, not from officers, but from sergeants. I remember when I was a young lieutenant going to infantry school, getting ready for infantry training and then airborne ranger and all the other stuff I got. But we had this leader's reaction course. And there was a sergeant who was doing it, who was following us through. And when you weren't acting well, you weren't doing it right, he would scream at you. And I'll never forget the words he used to use. I have to clean him up a little, if you'll allow me to.
Yes,
but he would shout at you, don't stand there. Don't sit there with your finger in your butt and your brain in Alabama. Do something, which meant, have a bias for action. Do something.
Right.
And that's what leaders have to do. Now, the Army, my beloved Army, has got a new thing called Mission Command. Mm-hmm. I think the Air Force may be thinking about it as well. I hate it because Mission Command is, do something. Well, just scream at them, do something. They don't need a big formula of how to do it.
Right.
And so I'm a great believer in a bias for action. How do you like that term? I want all my people to have a bias for action and get something done. And so I was taught that by the sergeants who trained me. And one story that's somewhere in one of my books that I'll never forget is I was a battalion commander in Korea. And I was told one day to do something really stupid. Get all the troops into a theater. Some guy from Washington is going to come talk to them. And I couldn't get all the troops. They were all over the place. So I started just finding troops, anybody's troops, anybody walking down the hill, going to AWOL school or going to jail. Come here, get in, sit here. And so we had this awful conference. And when it was over, I was walking away with an expression on my face of, that was the stupidest thing you've ever had to do. And one of my tops came along and he ate and he said, "Hey, Colonel, what's wrong?" I said, "I feel terrible. You know, I had to tell you guys to do this and I just feel awful about it." And he just smiled at me. He said, "Hey, sir, don't worry about it. We know you couldn't have thought this up by yourself. Someone else told you to do this." And so we're all for you. We'll take care of you. We'll cover you. We'll make sure that you're covered. And we count on you to do the same thing with us.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, thinking about the enlist.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, sir, thinking about you talk about the importance of an officer having the enlisted perspective. So we didn't have this position when you were the chairman, but now we have what we call the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, or we refer to him as the SEAC. So the senior most enlisted person in the DOD. Do you think you would have benefited from having a sergeant major, a chief, or a master chief, ride alongside you when you were the chairman?
Oh, that is such a loaded question, because the current chairman has such a person.
He does.
He's
Airman as well.
The senior enlisted person in the armed forces of the United States.
Yes,
we
sir.
did not have that during my time.
Uh-huh.
I had an E6 or an E7 who was on my staff, and his job was to follow the joint staff enlisted people around. I had 1,500 people on the joint staff, and he would bring to me any problems that he found or something that was going wrong, but he did not have that kind of title. And the reason I would never have had that title, although I don't criticize what's happened, you are a chief of the Air Force, chief enlisted person. It's just that it was not my style, because I felt that was the responsibility of the services, not the responsibility of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So you guys have it, and now the chairman has it, and I would not have felt it was the responsibility of the chairman. I don't run an organization, except the only organization I run was the Joint Staff.
Right.
And I have no other command responsibilities other than the Joint Staff. So I didn't feel that was appropriate within the services, but you guys did. And that's why I'm an old retired guy.
Yes,
now,
sir.
the one thing I will say is, as I have followed this, and if I did have somebody like you, I would not want you to sit around or travel around giving speeches or having conferences. The closest I came to it is the command sergeant major I had when I was a corps commander in Germany. I commanded the 5th Corps. And my command sergeant major knew that I expected him to travel all over the command, not giving speeches or having conferences or telling me what's going on within the command. And also being someone that my NCOs and my enlisted people could go up to and complain about something, which he would bring to me. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be traveling around, showing off.
Yes, sir.
That hurts you too much, Chief?
No, not me at all, sir. Because I think me and my colleagues, the other service chiefs, as well as service SELs, as well as the current SEAC, we do a little bit of both. And we certainly have a pulse of the enlisted force. But I definitely appreciate your perspective. Hey, one last question. People often ask you, do you have any regrets about running for president? And you stated very publicly that no, you have no regrets. You didn't wake up during that time, ever having a passion for it. But I was wondering, do you have any other regrets in life? Any other things you wish you could do over?
Well, I'm not going to give you my regrets, so you can put it out to the whole Air Force. Are you kidding? But coming back to your principal question, I'm a soldier, and I never stopped being a soldier. I never became a politician. And so I never thought about it until I left the Army and wrote my first book. Everybody in whatever the year was, 1965, Peggy? Yeah. 95, I'm sorry. She's always with me. In 1995, when my first book came out, everybody started talking about, running for president. I'm not a politician, but as a public servant, I had to give it some consideration. And so I thought about it for a few weeks. And finally, one morning, I woke up realizing this is not me. You have to be true to yourself. And being true to myself meant that, I'm a soldier, not a politician. There are others in the nation who would be good politicians and are good politicians, but I would not have been one. And so I awoke that morning, went downstairs and told my wife, this is not for me. I don't think it's for us. And I will give a press conference tomorrow announcing that this is not what I'm going to do with my life, but I will find other ways to serve the nation. And she just looked at me and said, what took you so long? And so instead of politics, I went into politics in a different way as Secretary of State.
Yes, sir.
And never regretted it. Never regretted it. It was the right thing for me. It was the right thing for the country, and it was the right thing for my family. And I've served the country in many different ways. The America's Promise Alliance. I have something like 13 or 14 schools named after me across the country. I have a school named after me within my college, the City College of New York. I'm a New Yorker.
Yes, sir.
And so I've served the country well. The country has served me well. I'm just a kid from Harlem and the Bronx, immigrant family, African American during the time when that was still a real problem. And I just did the best I could, and it worked for me. The title of my book. This book was just a series of stories, the kind of stories we've been talking about. And when I was writing it, I just wanted to tell stories. Everybody wanted me to write another long book about being a diplomat or a Secretary of State. But I found that this could be, more like me and more useful to the force. And so this is what I wrote. It worked for me in life and leadership. It may not work for you, but it worked for me. So read these stories and see if any of it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's done quite well, and it's been out for going on 8 years now. Still selling well.
It's done well. I'll tell you what, I can't speak for the other services, but I know lots of airmen have read it, and certainly because I've recommended it to them. And perhaps one day, as I start to think about writing my first book, I'll get some tips and advice from you. Well, hey, a wise man once said, no interview should last more than 30 minutes. So that's our time. I just want to say thank you, sir. Definitely appreciate it. And I'll give you the last words for our audience.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. And let me repeat something I was talking about earlier in our discussion. The Air Force. I cannot tell you how proud I am of that service. Proud of what you guys do every single day, the risks you take, time away from home, the dangers you face, and the things you've done for me in, my life as a soldier. Desert Shield, Desert Storm was the Air Force. Panama was the Air Force. I just have the greatest admiration for what the Air Force does. And I want to thank not only you, Chief, but through you, all the people who will see this documentary, or however you're going to put it together. My thanks for what the Air Force has done for me, for the services, for all the services, and for the nation. God bless them all.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and thank you for your leadership.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Take care, sir.